Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Human Pulse podcast, where we talk about living well with technology. I'm Fabrice Neuman, a tech consultant for small businesses.
And I'm Ann Trager, a human potential and executive performance coach.
This is episode 20, recorded on July 27th, 2025.
Human Pulse is usually never longer than 30 minutes, so let's get started.
So, Ann, once again, I found an article in the New Yorker particularly interesting to me. It was published on July 14th with the title, AI is about to solve loneliness. That's a problem. So I'll put the link in the show notes as we do, even though this is behind a paywall, obviously. But maybe some of you have access to a New Yorker subscription, or like us, access to Apple News Plus, and then you can read the article. So I guess in line with this podcast, I'm not sure I'm going to do justice if I try to summarize this article. So obviously I asked ChatGPT.
Of course.
And here's a 3-line summary. This is the prompt I use. The author argues that AI companions, while not conscious, can offer real emotional support to those experiencing deep loneliness, especially the elderly and isolated. While critics fear dehumanization or emotional deception, the piece suggests that refusing these tools may be a greater cruelty. Yet, widespread reliance on always sympathetic AI risks dulling our capacity for genuine connection, growth, and the very discomfort that makes us human. I'd like just to add to that basically, to me, it's all about the integration of these new tools in our daily lives and on the whole into our societies. So it's a big subject. It's obviously very challenging because it's going so fast, as we often said here. But it seems that we don't have time, or we don't take the time to consider the implications, and it's starting to show. And this is, to me, the conclusion for that.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind to me is something that you always say about technology, is that one new tech never replaces the old. It's just added on. And if that is the case this time, I'm all for embracing empathetic AI companions as add-ons to human interactions, not replacements. Hopefully that's what will happen. I mean, it's concerning that, the article says, especially the elderly and the isolated. Well, the elderly and the isolated are already isolated, so give them a machine. And I don't know, that's disturbing from a human point of view. And I'm not saying don't do it, because if you can help people, yay, let's do it. And again, as add-ons, not as replacements. So going back to that article, the article makes the distinction between degrees of loneliness. There is deep loneliness, which is very detrimental to mental health and wellness. And there is also just uncomfortable short-term loneliness, which is a little bit akin to boredom. And I don't mean to minimize what people feel. Okay, just let's get that clear right from the start. And I also want to get realistic, is that we all feel lonely from time to time. We all feel bored from time to time. It's very uncomfortable, very, very uncomfortable. And it's also a signal that maybe we need to go out and mingle with some people, no matter how uncomfortable that is. This is the way we work. I mean, it's the discomfort that's going to it's the pain that gets us to actually do stuff. Otherwise, I see it all the time in my practice as a coach, is that people will say, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. But if they're not feeling enough pain, they don't actually change. It's kind of sad to say. And that brings me to one of my pet topics, and that's that I think we're all getting a little bit soft. And I'm not talking about deep loneliness here. Again, I want to put all the guardrails up. We really need to help people who are feeling that kind of deep loneliness, and help others around us who are feeling a not so deep loneliness. But what I'm talking about is the discomfort of being alone, or the discomfort of being bored, or any number of other daily discomforts that we complain about and avoid. And I'm a bit of a stoic in that way. I think that we get strong by rubbing up against our own discomfort. I think that we change when we get discomfort, when we get uncomfortable enough. And I think that this is one of the way that we build skills. And the Stoics used to say that, and that's that, doing hard stuff is really essential for growth. And embracing challenges as opportunities is what builds resilience and wisdom and virtue and all those other things that we as human beings aspire to. So difficulty is not the obstacle, but the way forward. So I veered a very long way from the idea of loneliness. And that's what comes to mind, is that sometimes we need to push ourselves into those discomfort zones, maybe sit and be alone for a while and get used to the idea of being alone. It's very, very, very hard. Like sitting and being bored, it's very, very hard. The first thing we want to do is to pick up the phone and not be bored. And I do that all the time. I pick up the phone to not be bored. And there's a lot to be said about being bored, because being bored is kind of like just allowing your brain to stop thinking for a while. And anyway, there's a lot to be said. So I'm very far from AI. I'm very far from loneliness. But that's where this article brought me.
Well, yeah, boredom. It's to illustrate. I would be the first to acknowledge the struggle I have, for example, to not have. When I don't have anything to do, let's say. Try to fill the empty periods of time or what have you with, picking up the phone, listening to a podcast all the time. And so it's a struggle. And I try and do that, but, it comes back to me too. For example, I don't have anything to do, but so I try to not do anything. So not pick up the phone, not listening to a podcast. I actually, so recently reduced the number of podcasts I subscribe to. So I don't have this feeling of, oh my goodness, I need to listen to all those things. And maybe even a greater speed, because otherwise I will not have time to finish all that thing. So that's the, usual FOMO and stuff like that. And so resisting the need to fill up time is a struggle. This is what comes to mind.
Yeah, and it is for everybody. And I think it's because we are distraction machines, and we love to be distracted. It's one of the ways that it's one of our superpowers. So being bored is kind of the opposite of being distracted. And so and I'm not saying be bored all the time. And I know that it's helpful for the brain to have rest. So to think differently, at least to not be always doing the same kind of intellectual stimulation, for example, is so that your brain can have ups and downs of doing different things, and it's replenishing.
Yeah, I don't do that enough. And I'm being more and more aware of that. And so trying to change my habits around that.
It's like when we do sports. I mean, you're never going to train full on all the time. You train full on, then you take a break, you rest. It really helps to do it on a regular basis. Even during the day, if you actually think you can work 9 hours a day or 8 hours a day without stopping, that's actually kind of ridiculous. You can't. Maybe you can do it for a day or two, and then you're just going to crash, because you're not going to be as effective as you can possibly be if you don't have that pulsing on and off, because that's the way we function.
Okay, so I need to remember one thing, and it's funny because it's like my brain working against me. When I go for a jog, I need to make sure that I don't listen to something while I go for a jog, and it became really not natural to do that. So I'll try and work on that.
Well, so I will challenge the word need there.
Well, I want to be even if it's only to acknowledge a potential difference.
Yeah, it's an experiment. Yeah.
It's an experiment, yes. So
Yeah.
I agree with that. Thank you, Coach.
You're very welcome.
And a little bit more tongue-in-cheek, I guess, to go back to something you just said, which is like difficulty is not an obstacle, but the way forward. I wanted to ask you a question about that, which is how do you reconciliate that with us human beings being lazy bunch, meaning always seeking for the path of least resistance. Difficulty not being the obstacle, and yet we see it as an obstacle. And so to illustrate that, very recently I saw you using an online service called Prompt Cowboy.
I love it. I love that.
So for those who don't know, so you have the habit of using prompts with whatever chatbot you use, and so you put a few words. In this service, you put your few words in, and then it develops the prompt into several sentences and several paragraphs for you. And then you put that into the chatbot you want to ask the question to. So how do you reconcile the fact that difficulty is not an obstacle and you using that service so you don't have to think about your prompt?
Yeah. I love that service. It's amazing. They even say put lazy prompt here, and to which I just like, oh yeah, here's my lazy prompt, and then I'm so happy to have something because because we're full of contradictions, and because yes, one of the we are always constantly trying to save energy, and I talk about this a lot. We try to save energy, so we create habits and rituals, things we don't have to think about. We use shortcuts all the time. And at the same time, we grow when things are hard. I wish if it were one or the other, maybe it'd be kind of boring, to use a word we've mentioned already. So that's the only answer I really have to that, is that we're both. We need both. We do both. Anyway, which makes me want to circle back to that article in the New Yorker, which you mentioned, because I think it's really interesting. If you look at the science, it comes out in the article, and it comes out from some of the reading that I did on the side of that, is that that AI can be empathetic and compassionate, and sometimes it even rates higher than humans in being empathetic and compassionate. Which makes total sense to me. I mean, if you see a doctor in the morning, they might be a little bit more empathetic and compassionate than they would be at the end of the day after, how many appointments. Whereas A doesn't have that fatigue factor, for example. So, I mean, I don't even need to push into the science for that to actually understand that being true. From what I understand, the empathy that AI has is pattern-based and not context-based, because AI doesn't have this capacity of having the full context, or even when it does do contextual stuff, because we know you can personalize your AI and so on and so forth, it still doesn't contextualize in the same way that we human beings do. So it is one of our superhuman superpowers to be able to consider a really, really rich context of what's known and unknown, and assumptions we make about the other people from shared culture and context and so forth, and to make meaning from more than just the patterns, which could make the interactions more complex and deeply personal, perhaps. So that's one thing. The other thing that comes up frequently when you start looking at the studies, and the article brings it up, is that over-reliance on AI for emotional support could actually change how you interact with other human beings. We've talked about this before. And there is a problem of addiction. Addiction is a real problem with these tools. So those are some of the areas to think about in this question of how often and how we use AI in an empathetic interaction.
I think it's interesting. To me, what's fascinating is the fact that it seems that AI and all those new tools make us think even more about who we are. They force us to think about how we work and how we interact and how we go, every day on our daily, tasks. I guess in that way, AI is not just a tool per se, because it goes beyond it really questions us, or makes us question ourselves.
Yeah, without like us even interacting with it, we it makes us question ourselves. It's pushing us to be more human, maybe.
Maybe so. And then you were talking about the AI lacking the ability to contextualize, probably partly because it lacks the a number of senses we use comprehensively. So when we talk to each other, and even more so when we're in the same room, that not as we are now, but we use so we talk and we look at the person we're talking to. We have a feeling of movements, and we smell and whatever. We use all of our senses, and for now at least, AI doesn't have that. And it seems for me to be the basis for potential AGI, which probably won't be able to happen before AI is able to do that.
So you might need to tell us what AGI is in a few words. Hmm?
Well, so that would be the AI being the G in that case is general. So an AI being able to do intelligent things, whatever the context is. So
Mm.
being as versatile as a human can be.
So this is the holy grail for people who are developing AI. I mean,
Yeah. So
not that we don't have like 8 billion plus super intelligent human beings running around the planet already who could do all kinds of incredible things. Okay, sorry.
no, but then I would encourage people to seek interviews by Demis Hassabis, who is the AI guru at Google, and the creator of DeepMind.
Mm.
I'll try and find some links to put in the show notes for that.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Well, so what we haven't touched upon, and it's touched upon a little bit in the article, is this ethics, the ethics of using this tool and in dealing with loneliness, for example. And so in a conversation that I had this morning with my AI that was totally devoid of empathy, this is the answer I got. Quote, "There are ethical concerns. AI can perpetuate biases, miss subtle contextual cues, and sometimes generate superficially supportive but ultimately shallow responses." I read that and I was like, yeah, that sounds like a lot of people I know. Sounds like me some of the time. Sounds like you some of the time. Okay. I mean, people do that too, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I agree with that. The thing is, then it brings us to the fact that still AI is just a tool. So you touched on the addiction part. I guess you could you could say it's an addiction as well if you only rely on one person's opinion all the time without listening to anybody else. Like you're focused on just one thing. So using AI and only one chatbot to ask questions about your life and getting, this is what unfortunately leads to some people being very deeply, getting deeply anxious because the AI told them that they should change their lives, or they should, get a divorce or whatever, because, and once again, maybe anthropomorphize it a bit too much because you're only using that as a sounding board and as a relationship.
It's almost as if we give more credit to an AI than we would to another person. Because if, you're talking to a friend and they say you should change your life, you don't necessarily take it at face value. Okay? I mean, it depends on, obviously people do in certain situations. So this is way more complex actually than just a tool
And
ultimately.
we mentioned here also that AI doesn't often push back.
Right.
And it seems that and basically it seems to mean also that we don't push back. When we have a discussion with another human being, then it's like a discussion. We go back and forth. And so, oh, you think that I don't, and then we push back into each other. Maybe so because the AI is such a sycophant,
Yeah.
then we take its answers at face value because it always agrees.
So the takeaway here then is that when you agree with me, I should push back. Or when my AI agrees with me, potentially I should push back.
Yeah, I prefer that the second part. Wow, you're thinking. Thank you.
Okay, well, so what's coming out of this conversation for me is an understanding then the whole notion of interaction, both with human beings, which I know is very complex, but also the interaction with AI is ultimately a whole lot more complex than I initially thought it was at the beginning of this conversation.
It's a kind of interaction between humans and AI in a way that we never had with tools before. This is where AI is a tool, but different from any other tools we had before. Basically, I don't think a screwdriver changed my opinion on any topic.
Okay. Yeah, good enough.
Except confirming my inability to do handiwork around the house. And you would agree with that.
I would totally agree with it. Thank you for saying it, so I didn't have to.
Yeah, I wanted to be ahead of you on that topic. But that makes me think of another article from The Atlantic with the title, The Great Language Flattening. I will put the link in the show notes as well. And basically, the article is saying that LLMs, they learned how to write from us, and now we write like them.
Yikes.
Like, and because some researchers showed that, so we as a whole, society, we use AI tools to rephrase and write for us some emails. So you put, just like, the prompt Cowboy we were referring to, we put a few sentences or short sentences, and then we send emails that are longer and more structured because that's what AI does. But then we actually, I'm not sure we learn from them, but it kind of leaks into what we do. Mm. And so we naturally write into this the same way. It's kind of weird in a way because it also flattening, meaning that we copy the exact structure, and so we leave out what differentiate us from one another. And then it can also lead to another risk, being that as more and more online content is at least partially written by AI. I mean, we all now encountered web pages and Instagram posts and stuff like that that obviously has been written and produced by AI. It seems that, and then the models are training themselves on AI content because we know that all those tools, they scrape whatever they can from they can find on the web, right? And so
I wonder what the end result is going to be.
Yeah. Well, so, and one of them could be, some people say that the model might develop a writing style of their own, different from the humans, because the idea behind it being language evolves based on, fashion, and, in different generations rejecting what the previous generation did or said or something like that. But then to me, there's another risk more linked to technology, which is, and to illustrate that, it made me think of something that when you take a photo or video, and you have that converted into, on your phone, a photo is in the JPEG format, the video is in MP4 format. And these are like compressed file formats that degrade the image just a bit in order to reduce the file size, right? They're very good at that. So you don't see it with your human eye, so, and it's not only good enough, it's very good. But if you take the same image and you put that and you convert it again and again and again, since it degrades a bit at some point, and very quickly, after 10 or 20
iterations,
you see the difference. And in order to illustrate that, you can see, this YouTuber MKBHD. He does tech reviews. And 5 years ago, he did something. I'll put the link to his video in the show notes as well. And it's titled, "This is what happens when you re-upload a YouTube video 1,000 times." And after not even 1,000 times, way before that, the very high quality video becomes just a blur that you can't see anything in. And so to me, it illustrates the risk of AI relying on itself to produce new stuff or to train itself on, because at some point it will degrade and degrade again and degrade again, and then we don't know what the result is going to be. This is the whole discussion about using synthetic data to train the model further. So this is a whole new can of worms, open question, right?
It does sound like a whole new can of worms. And thank you for bringing it up, because I think it's a topic for another podcast, because I believe we are coming up on our 30 minutes.
Okay. So that means that's it for episode 20. Thank you all for joining us. Visit humanpulsepodcast.com for links in past episodes.
Thank you also for subscribing and reviewing wherever it is you listen to your podcasts. It helps other people to find us.
And why don't you share this podcast with one person around you? Just one, it's enough.
We will see you in 2 weeks.
Bye, everyone.